It's Friday, faithful. Welcome to another episode of the Hammerhead Show. I am your host today, Rob Schuh. That's my co-host, Jack Hammer. Jack, how are you doing this fine Friday afternoon?
Hey, Rob, it's Friday. It is time to have some fun, talk some 49er football, and get this weekend started off right.
Yes, it is time for that because I need some positivity, man. I didn't have it today. You know, I reached out to you. I was like, man, there's just, it seems like the same old stuff. I don't want to get into the negativity. And you had the brilliant idea of incorporating some of our memories of years past. You and I had a very blessed past in being able to attend 49ers games. And so the second half of this show is going to be some fantastic memories that have me fired up just in like putting my notes down, just in going through what I was going to talk about. It got a smile on my face. It got me into a positive space. And that's where I want to be on a Friday evening. That's how I want to kick off my freaking weekend. So I am excited to do it. It looks like we got some folks here that are excited as well. Raphael 5629ers. What's up, Rob, Jack, and everybody? We got sneakerheads galore. Charles Thurman. What's up, Rob? Hopefully we traded Jimmy. We have not, but we are not going to mention a quarterback on this show unless you guys mention it and we have to bring it in. Sean 951 Bang, bang, Niner gang. We've got Alan coming in at Rob Schuh and Jack Hammer. Happy Friday. The weekend is about to begin. It's Trey area time, boys. Yes, it is. All right. Everybody's excited in the chat. I love it. I love seeing the enthusiasm. I love compliments. I love it when somebody says, awesome hoodie, Rob. I'll take that. You know, I need all the positivity I can get, Jack. I need all the positivity I can get.
Hey, and the good part about that is it's one of the actual 49ers colors, because if you remember, there was a little time there where they went to a little bit more of a burgundy color, and that just wasn't the 49ers for a while. And
it wasn't.
And we've come back full circle, starting with the Harbaugh days with the actual 49er red that we all grew up.
Yes, you have to have that vibrant red. It's fantastic. Well, we are going to start the show talking about the modern day 49ers, but don't you fret. We will get to those fantastic memories. We will get to Candlestick Park throughout this hour, but we're going to keep it positive in doing so. And the first topic for me is the 49ers with the moves that they have done so far in this offseason. To me, they're showing some faith in their depth. I think that I, like many other Niner faithful, were initially saddened with the departures of Laken Tomlinson, DJ Jones, Raheem Mostert. But the 49ers didn't seem to make corresponding moves in free agency that brought in, equal or less than talent to really fill those roles. And to me, that shows the 49ers must have some faith in their depth behind those positions, in particular, Aaron Banks and Javon Kinlaw. Do you interpret that to signal the same thing, Jack?
Yes, that's the way that I see it. Is, well, they're stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo for right now, so they can't move on from him, and so that cap space limits their ability a little bit. But
it does.
But I have felt for quite a while, and I've expressed this a few times, that I really feel like when they went through their draft in 2021, that was really geared towards 2022. They went into 2021 knowing that Trey Lance wasn't going to be the starter that year. Their expectation was for him to sit on the bench that whole year and really roll with him into 2022. So when you look at some of the offensive guys that they picked up, I think they were really geared towards playing once Trey Lance took over. And so that's where
that makes sense.
That's how I feel that this team's put together. And, the one thing that we have that happens a lot, right, is that we, as fans or as media people or just in general, people have a hard time believing in things that they haven't quite seen, even though and I understand that. But what I mean by that is we see a guy here, there's all this work that goes on behind the scenes and we don't see it. Right.
Right.
So that's like, it's like anybody, right? The guy all of a sudden is a superstar when he's in the pros, and so Michael Jordan, but you don't realize the hours that he's putting in the gym. He had been putting in the gym throughout his life, shooting those baskets so that once he stepped on the court, it looked like it was easy for him.
Yes, that is very true.
Mm-hmm. And that was what I kept saying all year long about Trey Lance, and why when people were saying that he needed to play to get better, I kept saying he's okay. They're practicing it, whatever. We saw it. We saw it play out. We saw the growth from week 5 to week 17 without him having to play every week on the field. And with Aaron Banks, there's nobody that has seen him practice other than the 49ers since his injury against the Chiefs in the first week of the preseason, because the media, myself and none of the other media people, get to watch them actually go through their drills. We get to see them do their walkthrough, but we don't get to see them actually practice and the offensive line go full speed and doing stuff. We just get to kind of watch them working on their footwork and stuff like that, which is usually, at a relatively slower pace.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we haven't seen them, so there's skepticism. People are unsure, but the 49ers have that inside information. To your point, they have witnessed Aaron Banks at practice. They have been there with Javon Kinlaw throughout this offseason as he recovers from that surgery. And, if you believe him and the reports that you're hearing, it's a changed leg, a changed knee after that. And it doesn't mean that the 49ers can't further address these positions. But to me, it is a positive signal in their faith in those replacement players to not have invested within free agency. Because if you want someone to step in right away, if you didn't have faith in Aaron Banks, if you were the 49ers front office and you said to yourself, no, Aaron is great depth for this line, but he's not starting material, you would think they would probably go out in free agency and at least get someone that was going to compete for that role. They may address it again in the draft. You mentioned an interesting strategy by the Niners of really looking toward 2022 in the 2021 draft. And that makes sense to me as well. When I look at those picks, when I look at their lack of use in 2021, and when I look at them all sort of fitting together as puzzle pieces with Trey Lance, I agree with that sentiment. Just one thought about it. When you look at the end result for 2021, you think there's any regret from John Lynch and Adam Peters that they didn't spend more of their draft picks on impact players for 2021? Do you think they were caught off guard by just how far they actually got with Jimmy at the helm?
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like I think they felt like they had a pretty good team. I think that they looked at themselves in 2020 and said, this was a team that was more talented than our record. But we need to upgrade the quarterback position. Garoppolo, he's getting hurt all the time. The other quarterbacks in the room aren't good enough for us to win with. We need to upgrade the room. We're going to go out and get a quarterback that can take us. And then since we're doing that right now, our expectation is he's not going to play this year. So let's fill in with guys that are going to be ready to play when he's ready. And for the most part, when our guys that we have that are starters now are guys who we feel can win. But they're, you see like Laken Tomlinson, and he's a little bit older. And the 49ers really think about it. They weren't expecting to get back Jaquiski Tart,
right,
DJ Jones, and a number of these guys in free agency. The expectation wasn't that, but because of COVID and everything shutting down the salary cap the way that it did, they lucked out into bringing those guys back, which made him even better than they, I think, really, made him better.
Yeah, it most definitely did. There were a lot of those one-year signings that created an opportunity for the Niners to get as far as they did last year. It definitely, to me, it's interesting. I would believe that the 49ers, I think I saw it in the comments here as well, people asking about where they might address some of these focuses. BK from the Bay, Rob, I think the 49ers need to focus now on O-line and secondary. Your thoughts? I do think that the 49ers will look to the offensive line within the draft. I'm not sure that I see them making any big splashes in free agency. Obviously, they are hamstrung right now with how close they are up against the cap. I read this morning that it's under $2 million with the signings that have been done up to this point. Would you expect the 49ers to address some of their offensive line depth and perhaps, as BK from the Bay says here, their secondary early in the draft come April?
Yeah, I think you can expect them to go offensive line, secondary. They're likely going to have a need at safety. They're likely going to have a need at center. I think they feel good with what they have at the guard position. So I think they're really looking for a guy that can play center, maybe slide over to guard if they need him to, and as long as Alex Mack is coming back this year. Safety is another need point. And real quick, if I might just go back to what we were talking about again, just for a second.
Absolutely.
In terms of how guys can improve from one season to the next, or our feelings on guys 1 year maybe doesn't correlate to what happens at the next. I vividly remember having discussions throughout the 2020 offseason as training camp went on about a guy who was struggling in camp by the name of Tom Compton.
Right.
And those conversations were about how bad he was playing and how awful he was and how bad the 49ers would be with him. Now take that and think about what happened in 2021 once he was on the field and actually playing, and what the 49ers were able to accomplish with Tom Compton, a guy who in 2020, the people that were watching training camp were saying was so awful, because I wasn't there that year, that was so awful in training camp in 2020, how good he played in 2021 for the 49ers when he was called upon. So if you say you don't want to give the 49ers the benefit of the doubt, just think about some of the things that have taken place, and just I am so sick and tired of the negativity and people like feeling like it's just, well, what was me? This team was just in the goddamn NFC Championship game. And I'm not trying to be a homer, but I mean, come on now.
Yes, you do have to put it in perspective, because I think that there is an inordinate amount of negativity out there at this point in time. And I understand a little bit of the frustration, but I think that frustration, the spark of the frustration, has built up into this sort of bonfire of misplaced rage that seems to be going on. And maybe it's a small section of 49ers Twitter, and maybe I just need to log out of Twitter. But I think it has something to do with, the 49ers and being stuck in this limbo right now. I do believe that that's starting to drive some of the fans a little bit crazy, and you see it in some of the takes. They seem to be very extreme, and I would agree with you that the 49ers are at their core, a phenomenal team. I mean, you have 6 or 7 players that are or deserve to be paid at the top of their positional grouping, and you can't ask for much more than that, right? Within the salary cap, you can't pay very many more people at the top of their field than that. And to me, yes, we had to let go of some of the players that I would have liked to have kept. But honestly, when I look at the salary of those players that left in DJ Jones and Laken Tomlinson, those two, I honestly look at the salary and say, I wouldn't want that on the books for the 49ers. And so I am glad that they're going to fill those needs with depth pieces that are already on the team, or by addressing it through the draft. That seems far more sustainable to me.
Yeah, I think the problem there is that everybody's frustration is with a guy who's not even probably going to be the starting quarterback. And you keep hearing people talk about this team taking a step back. If Trey Lance is who everybody expects him to be, this team's going to take a big leap forward. And I do want to apologize for saying the GD word on there. So sorry about that, Kelps.
Hey, that is okay. That is all right. You were frustrated. It slipped out. Chris Royal coming in. My frustration is at QB. That's it. And I think a lot of fans are there. And in the lack of information, people hallucinate. That's just what we do as human beings, right? And right now we have a lack of information. John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan have not said a word since the combine, and we've been left as a fan base and as media members to hallucinate about what has happened since then. And the longer we go without information, the more crazy these hallucinations become.
I think so.
All right, let us talk a little bit about a signing that I think most everyone agrees upon as a positive, and that is Kerry Hyder. Kerry Hyder coming back on a very inexpensive deal after signing with Seattle for, a moderate-sized deal last year. I think he got $3 million and change to be with Seattle last year, but had that drop-off in production. Do you envision a productive season for Hyder similar to what he had in 2020 with the Niners, or do you think it'll be a little bit closer to the remainder of his career and what you saw in his 21 production with the Seahawks?
I think it's going to be productive. Here's the thing with Kerry Hyder is that he's been really, you can say this about everybody. Everybody puts up really good numbers, it seems like, when they play under Chris Kasarik.
Yes.
Kerry Hyder in particular is a player that's done very well under him. In 2016, he played a full season with the Detroit Lions under Kasarik. He had 8 sacks that season. He came back the next year. He injured himself, was only able to play 7 games. He fell off a little bit. Then he signed a lucrative free agent deal with Dallas, stunk, sat out a year. He then went to the 49ers, 8.5 sacks under Kasarik and with the 49ers. Again, big money called. He took it. Didn't get the numbers that he was looking for in terms of the team was looking for that acquired him, so they let him go. And now he's back with Chris Kasarik. And I think this is a good signing. He might not get to 8.5 sacks, but that's also might be because he has a guy named Nick Bosa that he has to share sack with.
You mean Nick might get there first? Is that what you're saying, Jack? It becomes a bit of a race, and when you have a NASCAR driver over on one side, it's tough to beat him to the punch.
Hey, party at the quarterback.
That's right. That's right. I think it's a phenomenal signing. And it puts the 49ers, when you look at the total number of defensive linemen and those that you would project to be on the 53-man squad, it puts them right at or close to the number that they would typically carry on the 53-man roster. Do you still see them continuing to invest here? I mean, we have heard continually this draft is deep at edge rusher. The Niners need, a bookend edge rusher opposite of Bosa. Would you anticipate the Niners still striking early in this draft to grab an edge, or do you think Kerry Hyder might actually fill that role?
Well, I think that Kerry Hyder might make the team, but I will make the team. I also feel like the 49ers are going to add a defensive end in the draft. What they do really well, and we've seen them do this a number of times. In free agency, they kind of fill all their needs.
Right.
And then that allows them to do whatever they want to do in the draft and go and grab the guys they have. Think about 2019. They went out and they made the big signing for Quan Alexander. They looked like that, that linebacker group looked like it was pretty full. Fifth round, they get some dude named Dre Greenlaw who happens to make the play that saves the season for them and helps get them home field advantage. So, that's the way that this team goes. So with this, I was thinking about this a lot yesterday after, because I was working on an article that I was writing about this acquisition, and it's just they filled the need. They're at 10 right now, which is what they carry. I think you're going to see them go out and get one more guy, and depending on who that is, that'll kind of tell us where Kerry Hyder type player might slide. Is he going to be an inside, outside? Because him and Charles Omenihu both have that ability to play both.
Yeah, to slide inside, because it is unsure at this point whether or not Arden Key will sign elsewhere. But I would think my interpretation of the Kerry Hyder signing was that it became a little less likely that the 49ers re-sign Arden Key. I think they still would want to if it were at a very reasonable price, but he seems to be generating interest from some other teams. So my expectation that in combination with the Hyder signing probably means that Arden Key is headed out.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that he's, the trade for Charles Omenihu, I think kind of points to that, because Omenihu is very similar in what he can do. And as he got up to speed in the 49ers system, as the season went on, he got better and better as well.
Carlos says, hey, let Arden Key walk. He'll come back like Kerry Hyder did for pennies on the dollar. I'm okay with that. I do wonder, though, if Arden Key doesn't get himself a multiple year deal, but you never know. It might not work out that way. All right, let's talk a little bit about the re-signings that the 49ers have made. They have re-signed this week, the re-signings that happened this week. We've got Dante Johnson, Jordan Willis, Jeff Wilson Jr., and then today we added Darqueze Dennard. Again, I mean, I love your astute observation that you pointed out on the last topic of the 49ers filling all of the perceived holes on the team such that it frees them up to draft best player available. And certainly cornerback depth felt like one of those areas where the 49ers would need to invest if they didn't pick up a couple of veterans. To me, Dante Johnson, with his versatility, the way that he can play every position in the secondary, he's a phenomenal depth piece. Darqueze Dennard, I'm not quite as excited about him as Dante Johnson, but again, seems like a quality depth piece. And these seem to, again, fill holes for the Niners that would enable them to draft best player available come April.
Yeah, and both those guys are very similar, right? Dennard and Johnson are both versatile. That's one of the things when you look at the 49ers, they love versatility amongst their players. And this is another example of it, because Dennard can play inside and outside. He's primarily more of a slot guy, more of a slot guy than on the outside. Dante Johnson can play outside. He can play in the slot. He can play it back, deep. Jeff Wilson Jr. is a guy who can play halfback, fullback, do multiple things. And the Wilson signing is another example, because now the 49ers have 4 running backs. Really, the running back room from last year is back. I understand that Raheem Mostert was the starter the first game, but he played. He had 2 carries the whole season. So
right,
once he went down, the guys that they wanted to have in that running back room are who they have now. I don't think that precludes them from going out and getting a guy in the draft if somebody that they really like is sitting there for them.
Yeah, I would agree. I tend to think that if the 49ers are going to build out that running back room anymore, they would probably wait until later in the draft, but that's just my gut because of historical observation. Jaguayo 56 coming in here with the kindness. I love it. At Rob and Jack, I want you both to understand how much I appreciate the hard work and time that you put in so that the faithful get great information. Jaguayo, I mean, that's very kind of you. I really appreciate you just coming in to say that. It really is nice to hear. You know, I mean, there certainly are times where it is I don't want to say a thankless job because I truly enjoy being live. I wouldn't do it if I didn't. But there are times where life gets in the way. There are times where, you know, you don't necessarily feel like 100% of yourself, speaking for me personally. And it's nice in those times to have someone like Jack that I can work opposite of, that is, incredibly kind, supportive, and incredibly well-informed individual. And then to have people on the channel say things like that as well. Again, it's that type of feedback that I really value. So I just wanted to take that time to say thank you for that, Jaguayo.
Yeah, no, and he's a great guy. He called in on Wednesday for the show that I did. I had to call in show Wednesday. He called in and we had a good conversation back and forth, and very positive. And I echo everything that you're saying, Rob. It's not easy doing what we do. It's not, as you said on your tweet yesterday, everybody's got stuff that you don't never know what is happening with people as you're tweeting at them or yelling at them, or even if it's not on Twitter, you might be out at the street and somebody might cut you off and you might flip them off, but you might forget that, maybe the guy just got some bad news about something. You have no idea that, so his head isn't where it's supposed to be. And, so just be kind. I think that's the biggest thing. If you want to have a debate with somebody, have a debate. It doesn't need to turn into calling people names. Just all kinds of different things like that. I know. It's as somebody who does this and has a lot of responsibilities outside of this. It's a lot of hours, and that kind of comment and the positive stuff that we see is very much appreciated.
It is very much appreciated. I echo that sentiment, Jack, for sure. An interesting one as we're talking about re-signings. I mean, the longer it goes, the more it seems like at least a possibility. And I saw an interesting way in which the salary can be higher, but the cap hit would be lower for Jaquiski Tartt. Now, I've heard rumors that it's not going to happen, but that's all it is rumors to this point. Do you feel like there's a chance that now that it's lingering, Jaquiski Tartt ends up back with the 49ers, Jack?
I feel like it depends, right? The market isn't moving for the safeties, and safety is a position that's deep in the draft. And the only reason I would say no is because I've heard some people that are, sometimes are pretty astute observers of this who have said that he's not coming back. I don't know where they got that information necessarily, but more than often than not, they're correct. And so that would lead me to think that he's not. But at the same time, if the market's not there and the Flyers are willing to pay him maybe a little bit more than they did last year, if they can fit it in, that would be a move that they could make.
Yeah, that would certainly be an addition to the roster. That would fill a hole. That seems to be one of the positions where I get that they've added some depth. They have a couple of players that they trust to be in competition for the other safety spot in Talanoa Hufanga and Tavarius Moore coming off of the ACL, and then the addition of our new safety who was primarily a special teamer but could compete there at the safety role. I would feel better about it if they addressed it with a clear-cut starter, and certainly if they brought Jaquiski Tartt back, that would fill that role. Carlos De La Fuente coming in. There's a kid named Pierre Strong at running back. He's Mostert all over. Talking my language. 4th to 6th rounder projected. Study him. Carlos, I will add him to the list. Yes, I will. I would love to have a Raheem Mostert type. That was the one loss that I did feel. That was the one loss where I wanted Mostert back. I was willing for the Niners to put up a 1-year, $3 million incentive-laden deal. It looked like that's sort of what he got from Miami. And, the only explanation I have for it is not the only explanation. The only one that makes me feel any better about the loss is perhaps the Niners extended a very similar offer and Mostert just made a decision, right? It takes two to tango. The player may want something different. Mostert hails from Florida. He may have an affinity for Mike McDaniel above and beyond Kyle Shanahan. Who knows? And to me, that could have been his choice of, I want a fresh start.
Yeah, maybe the waves are better out there in Miami too,
Yeah, the
But
water's certainly warmer.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I hear you. I really wanted to see them bring Mostert back just because of what he can do, but I understand not making the move to do it based on the injury history and those types of things, and who knows what happened and what went down with that. But Mostert would have been a guy who I would have liked to have seen back. But at the same time, when you realize where they got last year without him, I'm okay with it.
Swan Song has been mocking that kid Pierre Strong to the Niners all the way, and does point out that while Mostert was amazing and does add something that the 49ers are lacking without him, he played 8 games out of a possible 32. That is not a very convincing number when you're talking about health. And I understand those fans that are saying, hey, when it comes to Mostert and Verrett, that they would rather just move on from that because of the 49ers injury history. Me, I'm attached to Mostert, and then I went and did a dumb thing and bought Jason Verrett's cleats. And so I want Jason Verrett back because I want to have a 49ers cleats. I don't just want the logo on there. I want it to actually belong to a 49er. So we got to make that happen. Come on, Niners. Give me Verrett back.
There you go.
Andrew Hoax coming in. At Rob, at Jack. Is Marcel Harris still on the team? Will Talanoa Hufanga end up replacing his role? I don't think Marcel Harris is currently on the team. If I remember correctly, I saw on Twitter today that he is still listed as unsigned right now. So he's still out there. He's still available, but he's not with the 49ers at the moment.
That's correct. He's an unrestricted free agent. And as far as the second question, will Talanoa Hufanga end up replacing his role? I think that's a better role for Talanoa Hufanga than safety. Because if you remember, Marcel Harris was more of he was a linebacker last year, who he practiced with, and that was a position. And I think that's what Talanoa Hufanga is best at.
Yeah, playing inside the box there.
Yeah, playing down in that area. He's okay up top, but he just doesn't. He does not quite the. He's not as fluid as you really, I think, would want to have there.
Yeah, not quite the speed that you need there at that position.
Yeah, exactly.
Caligula coming in to say Pierre Strong, Cole Strange, great names. I agree. I'm still obsessed with Cole Strange, and I still hope the Niners are able to land him at the tail end of the third round. I got a great vibe for him at the combine, and I agree with what you were saying earlier, Jack, that I think the Niners, it's a great time to invest in your future center right now. And Cole Strange, to me, projects as someone that could fill that role and has a little bit of nastiness to him as well. And I love that play style.
Nice.
Let's transition to the fun stuff, Jack. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the 49ers and Candlestick Park, and how you and I both actually became fans of the San Francisco 49ers. Jack, what was your story like in the evolution of your fandom as a 49er faithful?
I've been a 49er fan as long as I can remember. I grew up in a family that's extremely into athletics. My dad was a baseball player, got drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies at one point, or was almost signed by the Phillies, and
whoa,
didn't go there because of my sister came along. So he stayed home and did that instead. So sports has always been a big piece of my family, and the 49ers are all that I know as far as a team that my family is rooted for. And so I just kind of fell into it. And my first game at the Stick was in 1980.
Nice. And where did you grow up? Where were you guys at when you were carpooling up to the Stick?
In the South Bay.
Nice.
In the South Bay. Yeah. So I've always been in the area in this region down here in Northern California.
Do you remember those early games, like those first games when you were real young? Do you have like crystallized memories of those, or does it sort of, I know you've been to a lot of games. Yes. Does it start to blend together a little bit?
Okay. So the first one that I really remember was the following year in 81, again, the game against the Cleveland Browns. That's a really funny story that I'll tell another time so it doesn't go too long, but it was the Cleveland Browns. They played them at home. They lost that game. That was the season they went 13-3, but that was one of the games they lost, and it was a rainy day at Candlestick. Oh, hell, I might as well just tell the story. So we got the tickets. We're up in the upper deck, getting rained on, but they're like right next to the booth. right, to the press box. And
Right.
so because of where they were, you couldn't see part of the field. You couldn't see from like the 30-yard line in towards the side, the northern side, right?
Right.
And let's just say that that mom wasn't too happy about that, to the point where she wrote an angry letter to Eddie DeBartolo explaining that, and that it was not told to the fans, to us, when we ordered the tickets. So that was the first game that I do kind of remember, and I was
That's
really,
spectacular.
yeah, and I was like, again, I was young. I remember the game, but I also remember it being rainy and kind of whining about it. But the one that I really remember as the first time was later that year. I was there in Candlestick Park when the 49ers clinched the NFC West against the New York Giants. I was sitting in the end zone closer to where
Ooh.
you used to sit on the north side. And the two things that I remember from that game: number one, the kicker from the Giants, after a touchdown, kicked the ball over the net, and this guy right in front of us, we thought we were going to catch it, and this big old dude catches it right in front of us, so we don't get the ball. And then the other one was because they clinched the division, everybody ran onto the field, and a friend of my dad's who we were with grabbed me, and we went screaming across the Candlestick Park grass.
That's phenomenal.
And yeah, and if you see video of that game, like when you watch like the 81 team highlights or whatever, you see Ronnie Lott on the top of the fans holding Ronnie Lott on their shoulders afterwards. And so I'm on my dad's friend's shoulders, and I wasn't able to give him five or anything like that, but I slap him on the leg, and then we grab a big piece of Candlestick Park grass, and I took it home.
That is phenomenal. I absolutely love that story. And you teased it, and so I think we got to show the folks. There is a map that I'm going to put up here that is going to educate you on where Jack and I spent our time at Candlestick Park. Now, Jack, you had two different locations here, and so you started out at one and then went to the other. Is that right?
Yeah. So originally, you'll see the one on the right there, which is right in the middle of the end zone. That's section 7 underneath the overhang at Candlestick Park. That's where I started in '85. Was the first year I had season tickets. My brother and I, our seats weren't together there, so I sat since I was the younger one, I sat in the lower seat so he could sit behind and make sure that I was okay. And
Nice.
then a few years later, probably around, I think it was 80, it would have been 89. The ability to get the tickets together over in section 2. My aunt's the one who had all the season tickets. But they became available, and so we were able to sit together in section 2 from 89 through 2002, I think it was the last year that Jeff Garcia was the quarterback at the 49ers.
That's about the year that we also gave up our seat. So my story is it doesn't start as early because I lived on the East Coast to start. When you were first going to games at Candlestick Park, I was still living outside of Boston in Massachusetts. And then after the beat down in the Super Bowl where the Patriots lost to the Bears, my family and I moved across country. We moved from one coast to the other. We went from just outside of Boston to Palo Alto, California. And, you know, it was a wild move. I mean, it was definitely a transition. All my buddies in third grade back in Massachusetts were like, what are you just going to be surfing there in California, right? I was like, yeah, for sure. That's what you do in California. It turns out not much surfing going on in Palo Alto, California. Not a whole lot of oceanfront real estate in Palo Alto, California. So no surfing for me, but I did get to start going to 49ers games. And that was in 1986, would have been the first year that we got one or two games in. My dad got some seats from somebody he worked with that had a bunch of seats in this row in section 30. And that's where my seats were. Section 30, row 31, seats 8 and 9. And we got the season tickets a couple of years after that and started going to games. And just for me, it was, man, you cannot help as a child. I was 8, 9 years old, but fall in love with the 49ers at that time. 1986, 1987, you're looking at Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott, Roger Craig, Tom Rathman. I mean, I'm at school, at my elementary school, and Tom Rathman comes in to sign autographs for all the kids, right? Like it just was, the entire area was obsessed with 49ers at the time. And it really was something to behold. I had never experienced that. Certainly where I grew up, there wasn't that type of feeling about the New England Patriots, at least not that I was aware of at that age. Started to go into those games, and quite honestly, the thing that really solidified it was spending that time with my dad. He was a hardworking dude. I mean, he worked his ass off, but that meant that he worked some really long hours. And I didn't always get to spend a hell of a lot of time with him, but we got to spend those moments at the stick. And they were really, really precious. Like I have so many visuals of that. When I think about being at Candlestick, when I think about being there, observing the Niners, it's always shared memory with family, right? It always brings back a really warm feeling about the 49ers because of that fact that it was time that I shared with people that I love, my father and my brother. It really was a cool experience.
Yeah,
sorry,
I have
ahead,
a lot
Jeff.
of the same thing as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I had a
Mm,
lot of the same thing because it was with I went primarily with my brother. Was who I was going with. He's 7 years older than me, so I was primarily with my brother. But there were a few times where my dad would, obviously when I first started going in 80 and 81, that was with my dad, and then we were the two that got the tickets. He let the kids get the tickets because we would ride up with my aunt who took a big motorhome anyway, and then
nice.
you know down the road, I do remember my dad was actually with me though for the Monday night game against the Giants, the 7-3 game. That was a game my brother couldn't go to, so it was my dad and I that night, which was just a blast of a trip.
I bet it was. We got a couple of folks. Andrew Hoax coming in. They should add a dirt baseball diamond to Levi's Field. I like the old highlights with the baseball diamond intact early in the season. That was something. I do have to say, in my process of checking off the stadiums of the NFL, I got down to the wire with Oakland Coliseum, which is random because I had been to Oakland Coliseum a dozen times in my life. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you view it, it was to view Oakland A's games, right? I went there to watch baseball, had never been to a Raiders game, primarily because of the animosity that existed between the fans. It just felt like a sort of a violent environment to be in, and I wanted no part of that. But then I got older and I realized I was going to miss out on the stadium. So I was actually at the very last game in the NFL in a stadium that had dirt around the infield. So I was there at the game where the Raiders played the Chiefs a couple years back, and that was the last game there ever was dirt on the infield.
That's right. Forgot about the A's.
Love it.
Yep, forgot about the A's and the Raiders.
Yes, Alan coming in saying at Rob Schuh, smash that like button like Lot hitting opposing players. I like that we've transitioned from the Debo reference to back in the day with Ronnie Lott. That's what you need. Carlos coming in with the memory. My first game at the stick, 1980. Niners down 35-7 at the half versus the Saints. Pops wanted to go. I begged him to stay, and Joe led us back 38-35. What a first impression, age 12.
That was my first game as well.
Oh, man, how do you not fall in love after an experience like that? I'm telling you. And this is the reason, Jack, I don't leave games early. I don't leave games early, period. I don't care what the score is. I mean, that comeback against the Giants in the early 2000s, where it was the biggest playoff comeback of all time, I can't tell you how many people I saw pouring out of the stands in that game. You don't want to be missing from the most epic comeback in playoff history, right? You got to be there. You got to stay.
Hey, you want to hear a bad story though about leaving a game early?
Yeah, please.
That is so stupid. 1994, 49ers are beating the doors off of the Raiders, and so end of the late in the game, it looks like they're pretty much just gonna run it out. And so my brother and I decided to head out to beat the traffic. We used to park up on the hill there. Anyway, so
that's where I parked, in the little neighborhood up there.
Yeah, up on Jamestown.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're walking up the hill to our car, and the stadium goes bananas. And my brother looks at me and goes, "How much you want to bet Jerry Rice just scored a blanket touchdown?" And sure enough, and man, we kicked ourselves the whole way home.
Oh man, that's a rough one not to be there for. Yep, that's what happens. That's a powerful lesson to not leave the stadium early, ladies and gentlemen. Don't do it. Stay there. Caligula saying 1982, first time at Candlestick when I was 12. I absolutely love the fact that people are sharing their own experience in the comments. Juanito, I was an usher from '04 to the late season. Lowered reserve, section 9 and 11. I miss the stick. Me too. And that's a perfect transition into our next topic, Jack, which is what is it that you miss most about Candlestick? What do you miss about that lovely old dump?
That's what it is. It's the fact that it was a dump and all the smell. It's just to this day, I can remember what it was like to walk into the section and just see the field on a weekly basis whenever there was a game. Just that step into the stadium, seeing the field, seeing the grass, and every home game, my brother and I would walk around the stadium. Even though we had our seats, we'd walk around the stadium, and because we'd go in early, and that was just what we always did. That was always that's what I miss probably most, is just walking around the stadium and watching it fill up and watching it come to life.
Me too. I mean, we would get there early as well because we took the buses, Caltrans buses from Palo Alto up to San Francisco and parked right behind the stadium, and it let us in perfectly. We would go up those big escalators that were right there facing that back hill, the hillside that you were talking about parking on. And we would ride up the escalators. My dad and I, we would stop at the very first concession stand after we got off to the right. My dad would get himself a nice, tall, cold, frosty beer, and we would get a bag of salted peanuts to snack on during the game as well. And then we would walk through those, those doors that would push open, and that field. It would just hit you every time. I also miss, maybe I'm kidding myself, Jack. Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe I'm getting jaded. But I feel like the fans themselves were less jaded back then at Candlestick. And maybe that's because we were winning all the time, so we had nothing to be jaded about. But it felt like there was an optimism, a confidence, and a trust in the organization that right now, even though the Niners remain competitive, I feel like is missing.
They didn't have Twitter. We didn't have all this social Twitter. We didn't have all this with social media. So, we would read the newspaper, and we would read Lowell Cone or, Glenn Dickey or whoever they were. And I loved
Ira Miller.
And Ira Miller. All those guys, right? And if you liked it, you liked it. If you didn't, you just throw the paper down and go about your day, right?
Right.
I mean, you didn't keep getting hit with it over and over and over again, because then you turn on the TV and the news only was on at 6 and 11 or 6 and 10, depending on where you were. So it wasn't like it was constant, you're just constantly getting bombarded with it. And, can you imagine what it would have been like though for Twitter, like in the 80s, like in 85 through 87, when the 49ers went 3 straight years without winning a playoff game? What that would have been like if they had Twitter back then with Bill Walsh and on that team?
Goodness, it would have gotten ugly. What would Twitter have looked like for the quarterback conundrum when you had Steve Young, Steve Bono, and Joe Montana all on the roster, right? There would have been various camps. There would have been a Steve Bono camp that was loud and vocal.
Well, that's what somebody said over here earlier. He said that he hated Steve Young because for whatever reason. I was in the hate Steve Young camp too until 1994. Then you love him because they won the Super Bowl, right? Like I said, my first game was in '80, so I was born and raised on Joe. As far as I know, Joe Montana. That's the dude. Joe Montana's the dude, and it's always been the dude for me.
Always. Joe freaking cool. Tom Jensen coming in. Tom, one of my favorite contributors here on the channel, because he reaches out to me with fantastic emails with amazing information, and I love the dialogue we have going. He says, at Rob and Jack, when Roger Craig came to the podium after 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving, the media broke from protocol and gave him an ovation. We wanted to acknowledge history. Roger was moved, ascended sports to humanity. I love that. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for that moment. I have a signed Roger Craig hat over there on the wall. I ran into him in 2012 at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, had my favorite hat on, and was like, screw it. Got to sacrifice the hat. I'm not going to be able to wear it after this. It's going in a case, but it was well worth it. That man deserves the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he was a heck of a player. We could debate the Hall of Fame with him at some point, but what he did, that 1,000, and so much of what he did for the 49ers was just so amazing at that time. He was there for
very special.
Three Super Bowls, right?
Yes, sir. We've got M.A. Duran coming in. I have the farewell Candlestick scarf they gave away. Yes, I have. I think I still have the towel. I may have the scarf as well, but yes, that is great memorabilia. Unfortunately, I wasn't there at the last game where there was the pick at the stick. I was there at the week prior to that. Ellis 10 coming in just to be kind. Gotta love that. Thank you, Ellis. Juanito, I miss the energy, the wind tunnels, and the hot chocolate. That hot chocolate was, I mean, some of the trashiest hot chocolate ever, but you couldn't mistake it for Candlestick Park hot chocolate. Like, it was scalding hot. It tasted more like water to me than hot chocolate, but on cold days, it was very much needed as a kid.
Yeah, here's the other thing about Candlestick Park too, since he talked about the wind tunnels and the hot chocolate. I was talking earlier today on Twitter about how I think Deebo Samuel has the potential to be the next Jerry Rice, and somebody started yelling at me and asked if I had watched the game with my eyes closed. And I would say this, maybe I don't remember what the games were like back then, because depending on where you were in the stadium, you could get a contact high just walking to your seats. So, maybe I don't remember what the games were like, because I was only a kid back then, and, that stuff might have got to me.
Yeah, a little bit of a lightweight back then, huh? Hawk Hater TV. I missed the crisp cold air on a playoff game day at the stick and the smell of burning charcoal, the essence. One time I went there with a friend who had it wasn't just the smell of charcoal that day. It was two-stroke motor oil, because he had a little dirt bike freaking margarita maker. It was a blender. It was a two-stroke motor and had a little dirt bike handle on it. And so you would throw all the margarita mix in and then rev it up like a little dirt bike. And it just made the worst ruckus you have ever heard. The margaritas tasted as if the oil had been poured into there, but it was magnificent. Everyone, within 100 yards was like, what is that? Let me get a margarita, man. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
That's fun.
BK from the Bay. I miss the atmosphere the park gave off and the sights from your seats. Me too. James William. I'll never forget opening day, Jets versus Niners. Game went down to overtime. Niners get the ball back after stopping the Jets from reaching field goal position. Garrison Hurst ran the ball 98 yards to win the game. I was talking to Jack about this earlier. Yes. That run started by my end, right? I was watching where Garrison Hurst busted out along the sideline down where Rob's seats are, and then he ran to pay dirt all the way down to Jack's side of the field.
That's right. Started on your end. He came to see me.
Yes, he did. That was fantastic. Holly World 73. Rob, best 49er memory at the stick was getting to see Montana's last game. The longest lasting memory of the stick was being at the stick for the earthquake during the World Series. I was not there for that one. That was Giants. That was the Battle of the Bay, Giants A's. I was not there, but I had a buddy who was, and he described the stadium sort of shifting in that. That was that 1989 earthquake. Very, very crazy.
Montana's last game in '92. It's funny because I haven't finished it yet, but I think it was season 4 or the episode 4 of the Montana documentary, and they were talking about that game, I think. Anyways, I was texting with my brother about it because I remember everything about that dang day. I remember we ate lunch before we left to head up to the game. I remember everybody just kind of waiting for the first half to be over with because the game started at halftime for the 49ers.
Wow, that's cool.
A lot of 49ers fans that night.
That was tough to lose Joe. That really devastated me. It really did. Nagatoni coming in. Nagatani, sorry. Tickets were more affordable and the stadium more accessible to the city. Now it's all tech company season ticket holders and secondary market buyers who pay out the wazoo for tickets. It is definitely a different market for NFL tickets than it used to be back in the day. Swanson asking, were you guys there for the Monday night game where Jerry Rice broke Jim Brown's record in 94? That was the game you were referencing in 94, right? That was the Raiders game. We were both there. Apparently, I stayed and Jack left early. So, yes, we were both there. We weren't both there for that moment, however.
Yep, I was on the hill outside the stadium when the touchdown.
I mean, so technically you were still there. You heard the roar of the crowd, right? That is a part of it.
Absolutely. I heard the roar. I didn't see it with my own eyes until afterwards I got home and saw the highlights, but I heard it.
Yes. Oh, man. Robert Davis coming in. 2002 wildcard game. Giants fans were obnoxious. Giants lost their long snapper, and the Niners made a miraculous comeback. It was bedlam all the way back to our hotel. It was awesome. I agree. That almost touchdown to Jeremy Shockey, where you just tackled him and didn't get called for the PI at the end of the game, happened right in front of us. And my dad and I looked at each other like, is it safe to celebrate right now? Like, are we going to get called for PI here? Is this game going to end, or are we going to win it? No, The Niners took that one home. That was a fantastic memory. When I think of some of the other memories to me, I agree. Location mattered, right? It mattered that it was in San Francisco. There was something cool about that. And there was the history of the building. Like it was kind of run down, but there were stories that were attached to it. There was a rich history within Candlestick Park. And as a kid, you'd walk into those men's rooms and they would have those giant troughs for you to urinate in, right? And I mean, what an intimidating thing for a 10 or 11-year-old kid to walk into. You got grown-ass men on either side of you, having drank beer all game, urinating like horses, and there you are, little kid, 10 years old. Man, I miss that, and I don't miss that. But what a pleasant thing to think of when they were just jam-packed and it was chaos. It was like you kind of stand in line to find a spot at the trough, but like if you weren't aggressive, someone might cut in front of you. It was organized chaos. But the biggest, the memory that's attached to me strongest, and I think it's because of the flavors of it, the Polish sausage at Candlestick Park. And it was the Guidon spicy brown mustard that was the key. It was the Candlestick Park Polish sausage, but then that spicy brown mustard, and you had to find it. It wasn't at every condiment station, but it was right at the one outside of our section, and that became a staple. We had the salted peanuts to begin the game, and then at halftime, I'd go out, and it was always like a 30-minute wait in those lines. They were the slowest moving concession lines you had ever seen. But I would stand in there for 30 minutes and get my Polish sausage and my large Coke, and it was just so amazing. Like, I think it's, those memories are burned into me, and so I'll never forget it. But it is sad when I think about the fact that Candlestick is long gone, and in its stead are these condos, right? I mean, as if we needed more of those in the Bay Area.
Yeah. I remember because at that point when it was coming down, I used to work up in San Francisco for my job, so I had to commute up that way, and I can remember driving up there one day and driving up to the hill where I used to park to get a good view of what was the stadium being torn down, and took some pictures and sent it to my brother. And that was the last time I drove over there. It was pretty rough.
I do still have 2 seats sitting out in the backyard, seats 8 and 9. Nice. The seats that supposedly that we sat on, they're not actually, right? They're just seats 8 and 9 from somewhere in Candlestick Park. But I still have that. I will always cherish them. Hawk Hater TV pointing out the $5 bootleg parking lot T-shirts. Let me tell you, the parking lots at Candlestick were epic. And in my teenage years, I may have been a bit of a rapscallion. Certainly got myself a nice minor in possession at Candlestick Park at one point in time. I couldn't believe it. I was like, everybody's drinking, and you point me out of the crowd, and you're like, look at that kid. He looks like he's 19.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I remember the 1991 season. At the end of the season, the 49ers played the Bears on Monday night to finish the season off, and I went up there, and my brother didn't go to that game, so I was hanging out with some younger friends that went with my aunt, and we started walking around the stadium. They're just like, because they'd never been to a game, so we're walking around it, and like in the north end zone, that's where all the stuff would go into the stadium right there. They had the big thing. Well, anyway, we're
big
walking
opening.
around. Yeah. Well, it was open just enough. Next thing I know, we're all sneaking into the stadium like an hour and a half, 2 hours before the game. There's nobody on the field, and we walked out. We walk out onto the field and like into the corner of the field, and we're looking around the stadium, and security guard comes over and is like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "Oh wait, I think we missed our spot or something like that." Turned around and left, but that was
I love it. I love it. I am asking at Rob, what would you say Candlestick did better than Levi's, and what does Levi's do better than Candlestick? I mean, I think Candlestick did a lot of things better than Levi's. It created an atmosphere first and foremost, and I think to me that's the biggest piece that's missing from Levi's is character. It doesn't feel like it has quite as much character. It seems like a very bland sort of a stadium. It doesn't impress me in the way that many of the other new stadiums do from a sheer architectural standpoint. And they didn't do a very good job of draping it in 49ers memories initially, right? They had to go back in and insert that afterwards because they didn't appreciate their history and they didn't build from that. Levi's does, to Jack's point of one of his first games and his mother's letter to Eddie DeBartolo, Levi's does have a view of the field from every seat, whereas Candlestick, there were seats, Jack, and I got one of them one time. Thankfully, the seat next to it was vacant, where you sat in front of a pole or behind a pole. Like there were literally seats that your view line was of a pole, and they were like, "Yeah, that's your seat." Like
You're
that's
sitting like this the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was a baseball stadium that doubled as a football stadium. So it had its flaws. There's no doubt about that. But it had a certain je ne sais quoi, a little bit of flair to it that Levi's just doesn't have yet.
Yeah, and I think Swan hit it best right there. He's like, one is in San Francisco, the other's in another city. For me, it's easier to drive to Santa Clara. My drive is way shorter than driving to San Francisco. But there was something about going to San Francisco to watch the San Francisco 49ers play. It was a trip. It was an adventure every week.
It was. And when you think of San Francisco, you think of the fog. When you think of Santa Clara, you don't. But 49ers amateur draft scout says, I remember being at a game and it was cold and you can see the fog from the ocean just hover over the stadium. It was wild. I mean, the idea that some of the games in the earlier part of the season could end up being colder than the ones in the middle of the dead of winter. It was a wild, wild weather stadium. That's for sure. Gary Dodson, I agree. Candlestick was always a historically mystical, gritty San Francisco quality. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. All right, so let's transition a little bit here, Jack. We are reliving the magic of Candlestick, and I freaking love it. I'm here for it. But let's relive a little bit of 49ers specifically. If you had to list off your top couple Niners, maybe you have one that you can definitively say is your favorite. Who are those that are nearest and dearest to your heart, my friend?
Oh, like I said earlier, the top one for me is that's easy. It's Joe Montana. He was the dude, right? Joe Montana throughout the 80s, that was my guy. I was a big fan of, obviously, Jerry Rice, Brent Jones. I would say one of the guys who most people probably don't remember that I enjoyed watching, and I always paid attention when he was on the field for the short time that he was with the 49ers, was Steve Hendrickson. He was a linebacker, played special teams for the 49ers. And the reason that I paid attention to him was because that goes back to going to Rockland for training camp and watching the 49ers practice through the fence, and my parents striking up a conversation with the couple that was sitting next to him. We'd come to find out they were there because they're watching their son practice, and that was part of why I paid attention to it.
That's cool. That humanizes the player, right? And then you become attached to them for a completely different reason.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
That's very cool. Jack, what does your gut say? I'll answer this one as well. 954 49ers fan says Niners move back into the city 10 to 15 years from now. I do think they move back at some point. I struggle to say it'll be that soon because typically teams stay in these stadiums for a while to really pay off that investment. But because of the animosity fans have toward Levi's Stadium, potentially it is that soon. I think they go back to San Francisco. I'm just not sure it won't be more like 20, 25 years from now.
Yeah, I we'll see. I think at this point it's hard to think of where they would put a stadium in San Francisco at this point, right? Because now it seems like all the stuff along the waterfront's kind of been eaten up by the Warriors and by the Giants. After the 49ers missed their opportunity there, I'm not sure where they'd put a stadium.
We can hope that they continue to mismanage the city and there's a mass exodus of people and that frees up some land for the Niners to build a stadium.
Maybe they rebuild it at Kezar, the site of Kezar, because the stadium is still there, right?
Awesome.
or
That would be awesome.
It's not the same, but
Hawk Hater TV, the coldest I've ever been in my life was an August night preseason game. I'm telling you, some of those were brutal. Like it was crazy weather there. Swan Song pointing out playoff games could be a mud bowl. Yes, the field level was slightly below the water table at points. And so when it was high tide, it turned into a freaking muddy disaster. And it gave the 49ers the edge because their players were used to it. They knew, their equipment managers knew what type of cleats that they should be putting on. They knew how it was going to feel out there. And the opposing teams would come in and have to learn on the fly.
Absolutely. I mean, if you go back to the 2 NFC Championship games the 49ers played against the Cowboys, those were played, they actually played 3 of them. But the 92 and the 94 NFC Championship games against the Cowboys were played in absolutely horrible field conditions. I mean, the first one was so bad that they sodded the middle of the field. Everything around it was pretty much just dirt that they painted green.
I recall that. I also remember seeing Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin in those primarily white with the little bit of blue on the uniforms, just filthy. I mean, just covered in mud. I think that was the game in 95, but the end of the 94 season where the Niners finally crested it. But Michael Irvin, if you go back and look at a photo of him, he was filthy by the end of that game. I mean, he also racked up a hell of a lot of catches in that game, but he was filthy. That's for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
So my favorite, if I've got to pick, it's got to be Jerry Rice. I just fell in love with Jerry Rice, his work ethic, the way that he performed on the field, but it was a close second for Joe Montana. And then, the entire cast back then just had warm spots in my heart. Ronnie Lott on defense, if I had to pick one. If I wanted to go more modern day, I was a huge Patrick Willis fan, Joe Staley. And I have to say, of the modern day guys that are climbing to that level for me of, years from now, when I look back, will I compare them to the greats of all time? Debo is doing a hell of a job of climbing that ladder and ascending to that level. If he continues at the pace that he's been going, and if he stays with the Niners, that's a hard thing to do within today's NFL. But if he stays with the Niners throughout his career, I could see him climbing to near the top of that list. It's hard to imagine him sniffing on Jerry at the one spot, but he might be 1B.
Yeah, no, I agree. The way that he plays the game and what we saw from him this year, that was Jerry Rice-esque.
For sure. I balked at it when you said it, but the more I thought about it, the more I agree with you. AJB bringing up Keena Turner. I love Keena Turner. Still with the organization, right? Isn't he still working with the front office at this point?
Yeah, he is. He is. I always remember two things about Keena Turner. One, during the 49ers goal line stand in the 81 Super Bowl, there was one of the plays during that goal line stand. They only had 10 guys on the field because Keena Turner did not hear them call him onto the field. The other thing I always remember about Keena Turner was after the 88 NFC Championship game against the Bears. You remember that when he's in the interviewing him in the locker room after everybody's all frozen and he's like, the finesse ass San Francisco 49ers on the coldest day in Chicago came in here and we kicked the Bears ass or something like that. I mean, it was just, I'm sorry, I botched it, but you know what? You get
I love it.
You get the
I absolutely love it. Syard, one of the sneakerheads here on the channel coming in. Favorite underrated 49er. Jack, I'm going to let you go first because I'm racking my brain and underrated guys. It just isn't coming to me. Oh, I got one.
You go first.
John Taylor. I just feel like he doesn't get the respect that he deserves. If he had been on any other team than the team that had Jerry frickin' Rice on it, then his name would be talked about with more reverence.
Absolutely. I love Jerry. I love John Taylor. That's one. That's the name that he was going. I tweeted out something about John Taylor, somebody being John Taylor, like Brandon Ayuk was what it was. I tweeted out something about Brandon Ayuk being John Taylor eventually. And the responses I got back, I was like, man, boy, you must not have watched John Taylor play football if you think that's not good enough for
you. Don't understand. I'm telling you.
John Taylor was a stud. Martin Hanks is another one. John Taylor's touchdown against Washington in 88 set that team to the play. It was a big part of them coming back and turning that season around. Merton Hanks was an awesome one. Yes, Merton Hanks.
Yes, he was. You
Tim
got any
McDonald.
that are coming to you? Anything pulling?
You know, another one that I really like, but he was only with the team for a couple of years, was Chet Brooks.
Chet Brooks.
Chet Brooks was a safety
I don't remember
with the
Chet Brooks.
no, he was a safety with the 49ers in the season in 89. He was a safety. If you remember in 89, the safety at the beginning of the year, well, in 88 and the beginning of 89 was Jeff Fuller, another name that is a stud. And Jeff Fuller had the bad injury at Stanford Stadium because the game was at Stanford because they couldn't play at Candlestick after the earthquake.
Right.
He was injured, and Chet Brooks stepped into the starting lineup there. And Chet, and part of the reason why I like Chet Brooks too is because I remember him again watching him at Rockland and Ronnie Lott chewing his ass out during a goal line drill. It was pretty fun.
Love that. Ronnie was not afraid to get in people's faces. The weird thing is, I met him after he retired from football. The nicest guy. Like, what I know of Ronnie having actually shaken his hand, had a minor conversation with him, does not jive at all with the replays I see of what he did on the field and what you hear about him being a very vocal leader in the locker room. 49ers Ultimate Report coming in. Sup, Rob? You need to do more shows with Aaron. Love Aaron from 49ers First Takes. I was just on with Aaron on his channel very recently. We go back and forth a little bit. I know that Jack has done programs with him as well.
This is John right here, John J.
Nice. I grew up in the Candlestick neighborhood, and I would always pass by the stadium. I miss that stadium. That's the neighborhood I used to park in. I loved it. When I would commute from not early on. My dad and I took the bus when he and I went together when we lived in Palo Alto. But from 96 till 2001, I was out in Stockton going to school out there. So I would drive back from Stockton an hour and a half and park in that neighborhood. And I remember one time these kids who, God bless them, they were capitalists, aspiring capitalists. They said, hey, man, you can't park here unless you pay us $10 or something like that. And I was like, this is street parking. Like, I get that it's your neighborhood, but I'm sorry, I can't pay you $10. And they're like, that's cool. But if you leave, we're going to slash your tires. What am I'm not going to fight these 12-year-olds, or I'm not going to try and beat them up ahead of time to stop them from slashing my tires. But I trusted that they meant what they said, that if I weren't, so I had to find myself another spot in that neighborhood, had to move myself along. And I had a little tip of the cap to them, right? It was clever, very clever the way they did that.
Man, these guys in the comments section have some good names. Seeds
they
comes
really
up with
Jesse
Sapolu, absolutely.
Bill Romanowski,
Steve Wallace. Swan says Steve Wallace in his double helmet that made him look like the Great Kazoo. Yes, remember that thing? It was like that pad on top of his helmet. It would pop off and they'd slam it back on.
Jesse Sapolu for sure.
Yep, for sure. Dan Buns. AJB throws out Dan Buns. Dan Buns for sure. Dan Buns is the guy who made the tackle, who was the original 57 making the play at the goal line.
Yes,
remember
that's right.
The first Super Bowl and the little pass on the out. That what an amazing tackle that was by Dan Buns. That cannot be. Kevin Fagan was part of that 86 draft. Defensive lineman the 49ers got, partly because he had torn up his knee at the University of Miami. Pierce Holt was a stud, just a underrated. He was a beast of a player inside for the 49ers. Yes.
So cool. Alan coming in to share the story. At Rob Schuh, I shook Jerry Rice's hand at the blood bank in Pleasant Hill, California. I was so amazed. I was speechless. That's the one Niner, my favorite Niner. I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of the greats. I have never had the opportunity to shake the hand of my favorite player. As a matter of fact, I was at the Steelers game back in 2019, and someone came by our section. I was there with my buddy, and we brought his daughter to her first football game. Someone walked by coming up off of the field and was like, hey, we got a couple of field passes. We just finished down there. Do you guys want them? I was like, sure, I'll take them. So we had two, and I thought, I'll give them to my buddy because, he's there with his daughter. He can take her down on the field. I had the opportunity to go down on the field one time. I'll tell that story in just a second. That's a funny one. But then I see them go down there, and who's down in the corner of the end zone but Jerry freaking Rice? And I see him talking to Jerry Rice, and I'm like, why did I give him the passes? It could have been me, Jack. It could have been me.
Oh, man.
No, it was good. He got a great picture of he and his daughter with Ryan Shazier. That was very cool. Very cool moment.
Yeah.
Robert Davis. I was born and raised in Loomis, California, right next to Rockland. My brother and I would ride our bikes in 100-degree weather to see the Niners practice. Man, I never made it out to Rockland, though. That must have been cool.
It was awesome because it was just this big grass field because it was like in their baseball field area, and I think they might have had a little small football stadium because it was a junior college. And it was just, but and you just lined up along the fence on the outside. You watched it. You could go sit in the stands if you wanted to, but if you sat up against the fence, you could watch a lot of action. I remember sitting up against the fence and watching Joe Montana and Steve Young and all those guys throwing balls around. And then when they'd go into like their team running their scrimmages stuff, that's when they'd go over by the football stands, and that's where that would be. And you could just walk over there. But it was, yeah. And then Robert's, story here of riding his bike, that sounds like Mike McDaniel, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. That's one of the things he talked about doing, growing up in Denver, and he'd ride his bike over to the facility and watch practice. And then he eventually became a ball boy. And next thing you know, he's an NFL head coach.
I'm telling you, I never made it to Rockland, but I did. I was in Stockton. Yes, Stockton, yes, sir. 209 all day. And so I was there when the 49ers made it to UOP. I was a student there, so I would wake up nice and hungover late in the day and go out and watch some 49ers practice instead of going to class, because class was not something I was interested in my 20s, Jack. I just wasn't.
Hey,
Like, I
get it.
I get it. All right. So we've talked about favorite 49ers, and we've hinted at this and talked about some of ours, but continuing on with the stick, talking about some of those best memories. And I'll kick us off here because I don't have it written down in my notes, but I reminded myself of it in talking about having been down on the field. I had one opportunity to get down on Candlestick grass and actually touch the field. It was very cool. It was, I forget what year it was, but it was during the Alex Smith era, and it was against the Atlanta Falcons. And it was around my birthday, so it would have been October. I want to say that we're probably looking somewhere around 2009, 2010-ish. People will be able to look it up because you will recognize the game once I tell you. But my dad happened to come across Jed York in some sort of a business dealing, just interacted with him. And Jed sent along a couple of field passes as a happy birthday to me because my birthday was in October. And I was just ecstatic. I got like a form letter printed from Jed York. I didn't hold Jed in any low esteem at that time. And hell, I got a letter from him. So I was pretty excited at that moment. And we got the passes. Then we go to the game, and the Niners took the worst beat down you have ever seen. That was the one where Roddy White went off for like 211 yards. And it was just one of the worst beat downs I've ever seen. But it's still one of my fondest memories because my dad and I got down before the game onto the grass. I touched Candlestick Park grass. Talked with a guy who was a cameraman who turned out to be a kicker fanatic. He had a Joe Nedney jersey on. It was just a fantastic day that ended very, very poorly. At the end, I was definitely, it was bittersweet to say the least.
Yeah. No, I hear. That's a good story though. I don't know. There was just so many of them for me. One of them that I'd like to go back to was 92. End of the season, I think it was the Buccaneers. It was a home game. I know it was around Christmas time, and where our seats were on the south side. In warm-ups, the guys would kick the ball over the net all the time, the kickers, because it was so close, and so they'd get it over, especially when they first start kicking. And so we'd go over there and we'd stand there and watch them. And so this one day I went down there and there was a big group of people, and I didn't want to get mixed up with the big group with those guys, so I stood off to the side. Ball comes over, they all reach up to grab it, and obviously they instead of getting it, it pops out and it comes right to me. So I got the ball in the hand, and they want you to give it back.
Right.
I wasn't giving the ball back. I caught the ball, turned, and I sprinted up those stadium stairs, those steps as fast as you could get up to the concourse. And my brother, he had a jacket on from his college team where he played ball at, and he starts chasing me up the stairs, but it's the same color as the security guys, right? And so he's chasing me up the stairs, like just to make sure he knows where I go. And they're yelling and screaming at him, "Let him go! Stop, you jerk! Let him go!" Anyway, so I run up out of there, and I got my ball, and then we stood out there for about 10 minutes. And we're like, think we can go back in without it? Yeah, let's go. And we went, sat down, and I sat there with my ball the rest of the
dude,
the rest
that
of
is
the time.
awesome. I used to watch kids that would do that. Like I would watch the field goal warmups, and when I was so inspired when I would see someone that caught it and would make the dash, because it was like it was the break for freedom, right? You're like, no, I got this thing, and I am gone. You can't stop me. I honestly wonder if I watched you and was cheering you on from the other side of the stadium, because I was there at almost every game, and I loved watching that. I loved it when someone actually made it out with a football, because it was, I mean, you could just tell the sensation that was going on for whoever in that moment. You're like, no way I'm giving this thing back. This is my chance.
That's right. I'm like, I got this. The only way they're going to get it was to tackle me. One of those guys at the top tackled me to get it out, because otherwise I wasn't giving that thing up.
I love it. When I think back on it, I've got a few, like Dion running around the field prior to each game in 94. That was just I really respected him that year. I lost all that respect for him the next year when he went to the Cowboys, but I loved him in 94. I literally defamed my Jerry 101 touchdown t-shirt that was my favorite at the time by writing out FU something Dion on the base of it on the back, because I was like, 95, I wasn't having it. Dion, you betrayed us. And I was angry because I was emotionally invested in 94 and then betrayed after that. If I had to pick a game, it was toward the end that really stands out to me. The 2011 New Orleans Saints game, that playoff game, just unreal. To me, it had everything that you need at the finish of a game to make it an all-time great. The storyline of Alex Smith, the resurgence of his career underneath Jim Harbaugh after what seemed like the end of his career with the San Francisco 49ers. The fact that, on that end around, but behind Joe Staley, Alex off to the promised land. We're up. Not much time left. Niners are going to win this thing. Fantastic. We're celebrating, but no, we're going to get our hearts ripped out of our chest by Jimmy frickin' Graham, who just goes on like an untouched frickin' touchdown to bring the Saints back up. There's not enough time left. The air comes out of the stadium. Everyone's deflated. I look over at my dad and my brother. They're for sure, we're losing this thing. How could it be? But wait, there was enough time left for Alex Smith to Vernon Davis in the end zone. I mean, the place just went wild. I cannot describe that. High, low, high. There's just nothing like that, to where top of the world, oh my God, my heart just got ripped out of my chest. And then, wait a minute, we won? That was to me, that stands out as, I think, my favorite all-time 49er game.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that had to be right up there. For me, if we're talking about just a game, it would be the Giants comeback, because it was such a big comeback. That Giants comeback.
Yes.
That was, I remember you see it when you watch the highlights of the game now, or the replays of the game, you see it. But I remember the touchdown by Terrell Owens, and watching Michael Strahan walk up to him, because he spins the ball, kind of does a little dance, and Michael Strahan running up to him and pointing at the scoreboard, tell him to look at the score, that how they were losing. And I remember laughing about it and telling my brother, look at that guy, he's yelling at him to look at this, and then they come back and win, and just the electricity in the stadium. So that's one, that New York Giants comeback. That was
epic.
Crazy. And you mentioned it earlier. Yeah. And then the Cowboys championship game after all that, the way that the stadium, I don't know if I've ever heard the stadium, even in the comeback game, I don't know if I've ever heard the stadium as loud as it was in 94 when Eric Davis picked off that pass from Aikman at the start of the game.
That was wild.
Touchdown. Yeah,
that was wild. You just knew it was the Niners' day. Like, it started that way.
Yeah, the whole first quarter, right? It was just bonkers. You have the interception, and then you have the fumble, and another fumble, and then you had the thing. Ricky Waters was just such a stud that year.
Yes, he was. And for me, I mean, I just have to close on this, because it means something to me, and all of my memories at the Stick are made that much more special by the fact that I shared those memories with my father, right? That it was time that I spent with him that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And I can still, in my mind's eye, I can see the look on my dad's face when something great happened. It just, I can see it. I can see his eyes. I can see it light up. It gives me chills. Like right now, gives me chills. Gave me chills when I wrote it in my notes earlier today. And I still, to this point, I still, when I hear the national anthem, sometimes even on TV, but most definitely in person, the overwhelming emotion that I have associated with all of these NFL games comes rushing back to me. And I just get goosebumps up and down my entire body as I hear that, because it just brings up all of these special moments that now live with me forever. And I just have to say, I'm eternally grateful to have had those moments with my dad.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a pretty good story. And that's awesome that you have that. I have a lot of that myself. My girlfriend jokes with me because she says that I tell time by through history, through my life with 49ers events. She's not incorrect in a total way. And, I spent a lot of time at Candlestick with my brother because we went together. My dad went with us too. It's one of the ways that I remember, because I don't remember the day just off the top of my head. It's one of the days that's one of the 49ers, looking back at the 49ers schedule from 2014, is the day that I can remember the day that my dad passed away. It was 2014 when the day that they beat the Giants. That morning is when I got the call. I'd been, yeah. And same thing with my mom. It wasn't a 49ers memory, but it's a football memory, in that she was in the hospital, and the night before she passed, that day she was doing well. The folks, a lot of times when they get to that stage, they kind of rally back, and I didn't know that because it was the first time I'd really been through it. And that was the day that she was doing that. And I had been at practice. I came back to the hospital after a practice, and they had the game on, and I remember watching it was the New England Patriots and the Oakland Raiders on Thursday Night Football. We watched the game together. We were just talking about stuff. She was asking about how my practice had gone that day, blah, 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 and all kinds of different stuff. And, that was our last conversation was with the football game on.
I feel like there's something nice about being able to tie memories that have added weight to something like that, because it does allow you to sort of place it in time. It does allow you to remember it and lock it in with other experiences. Obviously, those in your life being significantly more impactful than anything that happened for the 49ers on those days. But again, to me, I look back on those as the treasured memories, the ones that I hold on to, the ones that I hold very dear. And I'm grateful for the idea that they're intertwined with football. And I agree with Chris, who comes in to say the beautiful thing about football is that feeling you're describing. It's very unique to the sport. I do think that there's something about it, being a gladiator sport, being such a physical sport, being such a nationally renowned sport, that there is something different about football that I just don't get a sense for in every other national game that we have, even our national pastime in baseball. To me, there's something very special about football, and it will always hold a very dear spot in my heart.
It's that physicality. It's the stop and start nature of the game. It's the speed at which it's played, the ferocity of it it's played, how much every person has to be able to. You're only as good as the weakest link on your team. It's the only sport that we really watch where one guy by himself generally can't dominate the game. In basketball, right, Michael Jordan can win the game for the Bulls. In baseball, the pitcher can shut them out. When it comes to football, sometimes you have that day, but even the quarterback that makes the throws has to have somebody on the other end making the catch. It's right. It's the only sport that brings that out is football. And to me, it's the greatest game that there is. And
agreed.
Being a 49er fan in the way as long as I've been a 49er fan, and everything that we're talking about here is why I am so grateful for the position that I have, being able to cover the team, and why it's not lost on me any moment when I'm at a practice or at a game or writing anything that I write. It's because I remember those and I know how lucky I am.
Well said. Well said. I've had a great time with this show, Jack. I'm so thrilled that we got on and that we dedicated this one to a little bit about what's going on right now for the 49ers, but a little bit of looking back. I feel like it gives great perspective. And to me, it was a special 90 minutes to share with you, my friend.
Absolutely. When we first started talking about this, and this is exactly what I wanted to do today. and how I wanted to start my weekend. So I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I missed the chance to say it earlier, but if you are still here watching, which most of you are, you've been here the entire time, down in the description of the chat, in case you don't have it, is all of Jack's information to go follow him on Twitter. Go subscribe on YouTube. He has a fantastic channel over there. I'm guessing most of you are already subscribed, but if you're not, you should be. And as is the link to the Press Democrat, where Jack is employed for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, running that 49ers blog that should be bookmarked in all of your browsers. This has been, I just got to say it again. This has been a fantastic 90 minutes. It's exactly what I needed, Jack. And it's just been a pleasure chatting with you, my friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime. Like I tell you all the time, anytime you want to talk football, hit me up and let's do it.
Swan Song summing it up for us. Hit the like, hit the bell, follow Jack.
Make sure you're following Rob, because that's where you are. Follow Rob, because that's where you are. Rob does a great job. I love one of the things that I most enjoy about talking with Rob, and I've told him this off of the air, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it to everybody right now. Rob has that ability to make everybody happy because he's a fan who just gets it when it comes to relating to you guys. And so that's why I enjoy having these conversations, and that's why I make the time to do 2 shows a week with this guy, because he is a fantastic guy to talk to and deserves all of your follows.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. I will be off for the weekend. I am going down to LA just to visit some friends. But Jack, are you going to be resting over the weekend as well?
No, you know what? My son doesn't have his little Pop Warner game until Sunday, so I think I'm going to do a show tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but whatever I'm doing, tune in, because I might even allow you guys to call in and talk to me a little bit, because that's fun. I know Swan and I were talking a little bit yesterday, because Swan got his tail chewed out yesterday on my show because he could not remember some stats that he was trying to hit me with. So he told me that he'd come on my show the next time we did a call-in show. So I might let him on. And I'll probably let some of the other guys on too if you decide to join in.
He was a little tongue in cheek here. Rob never makes me mad.
No. See, that's the thing. Rob is the guy who he's everybody's friend. Hey, I'm the one who will tell you you're wrong.
Hey, somebody's got to say it, Jack. Somebody's got to say it. Well, like I said, man, amazing show. Great show. Glad everybody was here. Jack will be on this weekend. Go follow him on Twitter so you know when he goes live. Go subscribe and hit the bell so you get the notification on his channel when he goes live. I will be back next week. And until then, you guys know the drill. Cheers, 49er.